Hi, this is Alec Fisher, and I'm joined today by the New Jersey District President of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, Reverend Dr. Anthony Steinbronn. It's great to have you, Tony.
Yeah,
Uh,
good to be here.
for a little bit of introduction, Reverend Dr. Steinbronn did his BA in Liberal Arts at Concordia University, St. Paul. Got his Master of Divinity from Concordia Seminary, St. Louis in 1982. He went on to a dual parish to serve at St. Paul, Albion, in Faith Lutheran Church, St. Edward, Nebraska. I took a call at a church plant at Highlands, Lincoln, Nebraska, 1984 to 1986. Went on to be a presenter and consultant, 1986 to 1987, and an associate pastor at St. John, Kindleville, Indiana, from 1987 to 1994. Then became field missionary and theological educator in Botswana and South Africa from 1994 to the year 2000. Took a call at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Dimmock, South Dakota from 2000 to 2003, and has since become the mission executive for the New Jersey district, from 2003 to 2012. And currently serves as the district president for the district since the year 2012. As far as additional theological education, after the MDiv, he got his STM in systematic theology and Doctor of Missiology in evangelism and mission communication. And was that from St. Louis?
Fort Wayne, Concordia Theological in Fort Wayne.
Fort Wayne, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Gene Binkowski and then Bob Newton were the two guys that were the primary teachers there, Alec. Yeah.
Okay, very good, very good.
Yeah.
2007, you published a book through Concordia Publishing House called Worldviews, A Christian Response to Religious Pluralism.
Mm-hmm.
And you've taught a course on this book for about a 6-year period online at Concordia St. Paul. That must be fun, kind of going back to your alma mater there and teaching.
That was good. Yeah, Paul Mueller was one of my friends. Paul's a friend. We went to college together, Alec, and then also he was in charge of the Ozzie Hoffman School of Christian Outreach. So Paul was there for years, and so Paul just invited me when I wrote the book. Why don't you teach this thing once a year? So I really enjoyed that. It was online and there were MA students inside that course. So it really was a good one. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, very good. All right. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're here today specifically because Tony is going to be an instructor for the Lay Deacon program, which is an initiative that's through the Southeastern District of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, but obviously it reaches well beyond that because we have the New Jersey District President, which is really cool. And we'll talk about that a little bit also. So today we really kind of we're going to dig into Tony's story a little bit, get to know him. That's, I suppose I'm speaking to those listeners, get to know you and just kind of see what you're about. What makes you tick, I suppose, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Eugene Nida would ask that question inside his book on culture. Okay, that's a good question. What makes people tick? That's it. Right, Alec. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the first question that I'm curious about in all of this is, you look like, you went to Concordia St. Paul and then right to the seminary. So what led you there? What was the were you going into college thinking that you might want to be a pastor, or what's the story with that?
Yeah, that's a great one, Alec. I really didn't plan on being a parish pastor. And so, this is kind of when you retrace yourself, you reflect back on your life. My dad was second career. Dad was a general contractor, went to the seminary, when he was age 38, I think. And so, I went to 3 different high schools in 4 years. So a lot of transition. But I've always liked history. I've always liked science. And so I like a number of different subject areas. And that's what kind of drew me to, I think, liberal arts, studying. Because St. Paul at the time was almost all teacher education, like a lot of our Concordias were back in the 70s. Seward, of course, St. Paul, RF, all of them were teacher college, really. Uh, so I'd say 70, 80% of the students probably were teachers. It seemed like, at least.
Hmm.
And so liberal arts was attractive to me, like study political science, history, economics, the humanities. But I like science too. Okay, so I did fairly well in chemistry, biology, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's really what drew me to it. I thought about becoming like a research chemist. Is really kind of where I was leaning towards when I graduated from St. Paul. Um, but I really wasn't quite ready to launch into that either. So what I did, I just ran a small grocery store for 1 year down in West Texas, where my dad had his first parish in second career. So I'd be down there. I was down there in the summers, ran a store. And then one of the professors there at St. Paul, two of them really, Pavel and Mittendorf, they kept on sending me literature about becoming a pastor. They
Huh.
always thought I should be a pastor.
You couldn't escape even in Texas, huh?
And so maybe it was the first year of Latin, and not too many guys ever took Latin, and I did okay at it. And so they just said, they kept on sending me stuff though, okay? And so then eventually, as I was reflecting, should I do something like this, research chemist? My summer job though was working at a mental hospital, Big Spring State Hospital inside Texas, okay? And so the guy that ran it was on the board of regents at the med school. They were at Texas Tech. They were just forming a med school. He always wanted me to become a doctor. So I was thinking about that as well. I guess if you're a board of regent, you can kind of greenlight somebody to become inside the school. And so he was going to nominate me to be a student for medicine. So I was weighing up all these things, okay, at that age, and decided I'd rather, if you could help people with research, like with COVID right now, I kind of wish I was a research chemist. Wow, okay. But, if you're going to help somebody, do you want them just to live physically for a little bit longer? Or do you want to help somebody be alive forever, spiritually for eternity? And then that's what kind of caused me to go to the seminary. Was more, these are good things. Being a research chemist is a great vocation. Being a doctor is a great thing too. I probably could have pulled off both of them. Maybe doctor, I don't know if my grades would have been quite good enough, but research chemist I could have done. But being a pastor, I thought, Alec, that's dealing with eternal stuff. And so let's pursue that and just see what happens at the seminary. The test for me was always vicarage.
Yeah.
How well would I do in vicarage? Because the academic stuff we can figure out. I think we're a lot of gifted pastors in our church body, pretty smart bunch. But would I be able to translate that into actual lives of people,
Sure.
in a practical way? So anyway, that was going to be the final test. So again, a lot of rambling there, but that's kind of what it was. It was a seminary, 2 years. How would vicarage go? At a good vicarage down in Bradenton, Florida there. Okay. And that really was kind of the test for me. If Paul Ruff was my pastor down there, if Paul, along with a couple other people, thought that, I did okay at it, then I'd keep on going. If not,
That's right.
okay, I'll probably move on to being a research chemist because I want to do something that I'm halfway good at. You know what I mean? So.
Well,
Yeah.
good. I'm glad as a native Floridian myself, I'm glad that it was in Florida that
Right.
made all the
That's right.
difference for you.
That's where it happened. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though, because you had people, encouraging you in two different directions.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a very interesting.
Yep.
Uh,
And how do you weigh that up?
yeah.
Leadership talks about that. You have places where there's, this would have been Clinton. He taught at Fuller, okay, and he wrote a book on leadership. And he said, we have these opportunities. There's convergence that happens, but also there's times when we're tested kind of in life. Where do you want to go? Okay. And God can bless either way, I think, Alec, in a way. But the bottom line is we get these moments of testing. We're weighing things up. And what path do you want to pursue? So that's true in life. And as I reflect back on it, it's kind of interesting now, convergence and all that stuff. Integrity tests go on, but also vocational tests. What are you going to be? How are you going to spend your life? How are you going to steward your life? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just looking at, reading through the different places that you've served, you've had, seem to have, I assume, very different experiences in all these different places too.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
just kind of following where you've been called and uh, just looking, having made your way from, gosh, Nebraska to New Jersey. That's
Right.
a long drive.
The big shift.
That's a
I
long.
remember when I left Nebraska to go out east. I was on Dimick really when that one happened, when we got called to be mission exec, but it's not a whole lot different there, South Dakota, right?
Yeah, sure.
But they just thought that was, they couldn't imagine, some of the pastors in my circuit, that anyone in their right mind would leave Dakota to go to Jersey. That's for sure.
Wow.
Because it's quite a different world. But being a missionary, yeah, again, you talked about your experiences, Alec, living overseas and
Yeah.
traveling and stuff. Once it gets inside your system, it's not too challenging in a way. You're ready to launch out and try different places because you've done cultural adjustment before, and you know that you'll probably be able to pull it off again, no matter where you go, right?
Yeah, I think you gain some kind of there's a sensitivity. It's almost like maybe it's your palate is more refined or something for
Yep.
different cultures, right? So you experience it a little bit, and then your palate becomes more and more refined, and you can kind of get into the weeds of things and pick things apart, and you see, okay, there really is a subtle difference here that I probably would not have acknowledged before or
Yeah.
experienced. I
Yeah.
let's see,
Yeah.
I tell people, and this might be offensive to some, but I felt like it was a cross-cultural experience going from Florida to St. Louis.
You're right. All those are. I mean,
you know,
it's some, for sure, subcultures. You're dealing with a different world. But here's just one insight. Gene Minkowski had a great one, I thought, a long time ago, Alec. He said, if you really wanted to become formed in the most complete way, it'd be nice if you could live inside Asia for a while because
Hmm,
of their worldview, their way of looking at reality. If you
okay,
could live in Africa for a while, and if you'd live in the States or Europe for a while, those three big world kind of areas, if you could live there for any extended period of time, you'd be able to pick up on these sensitivities, these nuances inside
yeah,
these different places, and that would cause us to become probably as complete as a human being could be, at least in terms of anthropology and culture. So
yeah.
you're right. It helps us, I think. We just become a little bit more complete as we are exposed to other people, other ways of living, other ways of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it dawns on me that even in our culture today, we probably experience each other a little less because I think there might be even a fear to um, speak what's really on your mind or your own opinions, right?
Yeah.
Because there's certain opinions that have been elevated, and if you don't go along with one of those things, it makes it difficult to to get along well,
You bet.
socially or
That's right.
educationally, or even is in your employment wise. I would imagine that you don't really get to. It's almost like you're experiencing really a veneer of somebody else as opposed to just experiencing that person, or maybe a facade might be
That's
a
right.
better word.
Yeah.
um
Yeah,
so hopefully,
that's what kind of drew me to worldview, I think, Alec,
yeah.
because how do they really look at reality? Okay, that's really what worldview is about.
Hmm.
As I look out at the world, how do I make sense of it? Okay. And so worldview then allows you, worldview kind of questions can help you really understand what's in the head and the heart of somebody else. Because you're right, often we just see the exterior kind of things. We never get the opportunity to get deep inside a person. So, like, what makes a person tick? Your opening question.
Yeah.
That's it. That's Eugene Nida's way of talking about that. That's
Hmm.
good. Yep. Yep.
So I'm just curious then. All right, so you grew up in Iowa,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you took a call to Nebraska. Now
Yeah.
Albion and St. Edward, or what part of the state are they? I'm not very good with Nebraska
Yeah. It's
geography. I know where Lincoln is. I know where Omaha is,
It's
but
good. Yeah. It's about an hour west of Omaha.
okay.
Okay. So it's really not bad. I mean, it's on the eastern part of the state, and it's a nice town. Albion was 2,000 people. St. Ed was about 800 people, about 11 miles apart, dual parish.
Okay.
Um, so
That's
it's
not
just
that far apart. Yeah.
no, not far at all. It really
Yeah.
was nice. I liked having the dual parish
Huh.
myself. Two small towns where you get to know people and get to be known and stuff like that. So it's a
Yeah.
nice way to start out ministry. Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a sense that you were going to be called to the an area within the Midwest, coming
Not
out of
really, not
no?
really there. Yeah, we were pleasantly surprised because Carol's one of her. My wife comes from a large family, and her sister was married to the principal that had at one of the churches in our circuit, in that very circuit. So we got to be with family almost right away inside the circuit. So that was a nice opportunity. But this Columbus circuit, Columbus, Nebraska.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's a nice area. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
good town.
Okay. And then you were part of a church plant. Were you the main? Uh, were you kind of working as a sole pastor planting the church, or how did that work exactly?
Yeah, it was kind of a different thing. Like for you, Alec, you know, you're kind of getting recruited inside the district to do the certain things already at a
Yeah,
young
that's
age.
right.
Okay, that's what happened to me. They asked me to be on the board of evangelism for the district. Okay, and I
Okay.
just got there, but the reason I was because I was taking some doctorate of ministry courses at Fuller Theological Seminary with Carl George
Oh,
and
interesting.
Peter Wagner. This is church growth. This is way back.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
back in the late 70s, early 80s. But I started enrolling inside that because I need a little bit more practical theology. The SEMs do a nice job at practical theology, but I found out right away too, there's probably more things I need to learn, okay? Especially if I wanted to try and help grow a congregation. And so I took some church growth stuff. C. Peter Wagner was kind of the big guy back then. Win Aren't, those are some names that some people might remember from way back. And Carl George is one of the players. You got McGavran, you know, he's part of the mix too. See, so anyway, I started taking just a couple of courses. Well, the district president saw that, okay, if Tony's already starting to do stuff in practical, maybe he should plant a church then. Okay, and
You just
so
came out of seminary. Why not?
anyway, so that's how it started. I think after about a year there, the district president said we've got some work going inside Lincoln on the northwest part of town.
Okay.
Let's see if Steinbronn's up to it. And so that's how it started. There were 7 families, okay, that somebody had put there was a lay missionary, a lay evangelist inside the Lincoln area that had gathered 7 families together, was doing Bible study with them, Alec. And then he just asked, then they called a pastor then to kind of start working with those 7 families. So that's how it started. And then, you know, you're on district subsidy back then. You know, I had money for about
Sure.
2 years. They gave me a small building with Forward and Remembrance money. They raised some money in
Wow.
with that. So they built a real small little building for me. And it was nice, seated about 80 people to 100. Okay. And so we filled that up then after about 2 years. So we had just gotten almost viable, I think, really after 2 years. That was always
Okay.
kind of the marching orders back then to pull it off. And then I was kind of burnt out though, almost though, with all the
Sure.
work to do, you know, trying to get a church to that size. And then the next guy that took over did a real nice job. So anyway, it was good. I did it really hard for 2 years. And then I went to work with Ken Hunter with Church Growth, you know, doing consultations and doing some workshop presentations and stuff like that. So I did that for a little bit, specialized kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, what's really neat coming off of that very, I don't know, we've used the word practical, very practical experience and say, okay, that's,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
I'm maybe a little tired from doing it, but I can talk about it.
that's right.
Let's
That's
just go
right.
talk about it. It's good. It's almost, but you
Yeah.
probably, I wonder what kind of, uh, maybe, you know, as you thought about your experiences from the previous 2 years, and then even the previous years from the dual parish, what was kind of floating around in your head as you're talking to these people, you know,
Right.
I assume you had plenty of stories and,
Right.
you
Well, the
know,
church plant was really good, and I know some of the stuff that the southeastern district, the purpose behind this is
yeah,
to kind of launch out inside neighborhoods and stuff. And how do you foster the growth of God's kingdom? And so the church plant was really good because about a third of our people were Missouri Synod people that were pretty, you know, mature in a way.
yeah,
About a third of our people were Protestant, but had been away from the church for a while. And about
okay,
a third of our people weren't Christian at all. I mean, it was really an interesting mix back then
wow,
already. Back in the 80s, mid 80s, about a third of the people we had join our congregation were not Christians inside Lincoln there. So
yeah,
um, it was an interesting mix. And then how do you get people to work together? I think, how do you grow maturity kind of thing?
yeah,
So what I liked about a church plant like that, Alec, you got a chance to test the leadership. Who's willing to do what? Are they willing to be a servant? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Are they kind of lording over others when they come together? So you do a lot of discerning that first year, I think, in a church plant as people come in, and who does what well, and then you're a lot better off after about 2 years. But there's a lot of conflict resolution you end up doing
sure.
too. Okay, you're always trying to keep the tribe together if you can.
And
Okay,
and that doesn't even, a church plant
yeah,
doesn't even come with the baggage of, decades of
that's right.
of family history or whatever.
I know.
So
Well, here's
yeah,
our biggest story. If I can just throw one out. I
yeah,
mean, I
please.
know we're under time here probably a bit, but uh, it was the subdivision that the church was located in had earth tone for the colors of all the homes. You couldn't have a white building, okay? Um, and so we met, and the church, the original 7 families, um, wanted it all white because every church that they ever knew inside Nebraska was white, okay? But the
Okay.
new people that joined the church, we had 28 people there that night, I remember, Alec, for the meeting when we were going to decide the color of the church building. But all the new people thought it should be earth tone, okay? Okay, it should be like an off-white, a brown or something. I forget what color we went with.
The
But
important
the vote
decisions,
was
right?
21-7, okay? And all the original people felt slighted by the new group, okay, the 21.
Wow.
So they marched out of the meeting. I mean, they just marched out and said this meeting's over kind of deal. What I was so proud of was everyone, they cut them off in the parking lot outside. They wouldn't let them drive away, okay, practically. And so everybody is doing their conflict resolution out in the parking lot. And we went back in and finished the meeting, okay. It
Wow.
ended up working out really well, but it got kind of heated, But people that they don't know each other that well, they're
Yeah.
trying to figure each other out. They're dealing with an issue that I thought was still somewhat trivial myself as I look at it, but for them it was a pretty important issue. You know what I mean? And so it almost caused us to really probably not exist much more. You know what I mean? It really could have blown up bad. Okay,
Yeah.
it ended up working out okay. We ended up making it earth tone. Okay, and ended
Hmm.
up being not a white building. Um, but it's still, I understood the people why they wanted it to be white. Every church they ever knew was white. You go with what tradition is. But are people willing to do something in order to be sensitive to the community?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
what the
right.
community was asking for, are you willing to become part of us? I thought it was a pretty nice thing that the people decided. It showed a
Yeah.
sensitivity to others. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's especially as you say, it's such a trivial
Hmm.
thing. I mean, we could say, it seemed trivial to me, but really, I mean, I don't think there's anyone alive at the moment that would say that's not a trivial thing, the color of the building, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a-
it.
and the fact that it did seem to kind of, if people are storming out of the meeting,
Yeah.
um, but at
Yeah.
the same moment having reconciliation right there by the end of the
Yeah.
night or whatever,
That's right.
that's
They
a
engaged in
that's
it
an
right
incredible
away.
thing.
They didn't let it fester. They wanted to deal
Yeah.
with it that night. And I was so proud of them that night because, they had to do it. I could help lead, and do some of the conversation. But it's really special when the community of believers engages in it in that moment. And
Yeah.
everybody did. I think everyone was out there in the parking lot. Nobody
Yeah.
wanted to see this thing. We cared enough for each other that we wanted this thing to work out well. But at the same time, yeah, it got pretty hot there, I remember.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, it also seems, something like that, there's got to be something, something trivial on the surface and really something, deep down,
yeah,
something else really going on, right? So seems like you probably had a clash of, talking about worldviews.
there you go.
You named
That's
three
right.
different groups of people within the congregation. And,
Right.
these people see the world in different ways.
That's right. That's
Um, but
exactly it. Yep.
but coming back together in a way of reconciliation is quite something. I assume then maybe that situation might have had an effect on the way they all see the world, or at
Yeah.
least the way they
Yeah.
see one another, right?
That's right.
Um,
That was
so
right. The
that's
other thing that happened about a year later, though, we did lose two of those 7 families. And that was hard on us, I think,
Hmm.
but at the same time,
Yeah.
it enabled us to grow. This is always a hard thing too, maybe for some of the people going to listening to this, but um, sometimes there's a parting of the way. There's a lot of big churches inside Lincoln, Nebraska at the time, so
Sure.
you had plenty of choice to go to someplace else. And so I knew those two families would be cared for at a sister congregation. That wasn't so hard
Yeah.
as a pastor, but at the same time, there's some grieving that goes on when the original. Schaller talks about this. You've got the homesteaders and the pioneers inside congregations. You
Mhm.
got the long-term members that have been there a long time, and they so again they've done a lot for that congregation, okay, but at the same time sometimes they think they get to have a little bit more say, on how
Sure.
things
Sure.
should be too, you know what I mean? But then you've got the new people, and so how do you allow the gifts of the body in order to exert itself in order to accomplish God's mission and work? And so what's a healthy way of doing that?
Yeah.
And so two families though were kind of being not so helpful, okay,
Sure.
where the church needed to move towards. And so they ended up leaving the congregation. There was some grieving, but we were able then to grow even more because of those resistance wasn't part of the body anymore. So anyway, that's a
Sure.
hard thing.
Yeah.
Probably the people listening have experienced that too in their congregation a bit, but how do you deal with that kind of phenomenon, I guess, inside parish life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a good lesson and a hard lesson, as you
it is a
say.
hard one.
And
Yeah,
but at the same time, a very encouraging story, just in general. Talking of we're here because we're talking about you're going to be teaching the first class for the late deacon program in this southeastern district, um,
yeah,
and to say, all right, so it started with a layman bringing families together.
exactly it.
And it's like, yeah, that's that's how it's done. And a third of the congregation being non-Christian,
Yeah,
right? In a world, I suppose, that was probably far more Christianized than
that's
at least
exactly
our
it.
society right now.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah,
that's a big thing,
yeah. That's
because
already starting to become part of the urban world, I think. Even though Lincoln, Nebraska, we wouldn't say like on the east here, that's urban in a way. For the Midwest, that's pretty urban.
sure,
Omaha, Lincoln is okay. University town, you got the academic. It's pretty Christian state. Nebraska would have
yeah,
been at the same time. The people we were drawing to our church plant, there about a third of them didn't know the Christian faith already. See, so it,
yeah,
it was there inside that city. That's right.
yeah. And that's we're immersed in that now,
That's right.
which is something. so so
Yeah,
I want to know more about
yeah,
your uh, I guess move from uh, being in the Midwest
yeah,
down to Botswana in
yeah,
South Africa.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
then of course then you go up to South Dakota and then you come over to New Jersey. But
yeah,
you spent 94 to 2000
yeah,
uh, there. So I want to hear something about that. What's
yeah,
what? How did
yeah,
that happen?
yeah. That's
Take as
good.
much time as you need, by the way.
Yeah, that's good. No, what I did my STM at Fort Wayne when I was in Indiana. Then Kendallville is just about 20 miles north of Fort Wayne, and so whenever I was taking doing hospital visits and stuff down in Fort Wayne, I'd take a class, a graduate
Sure.
course there. Okay, so it worked out really well to get the STM and systematics. But then I was thinking about maybe going to do Reformation studies because I've always liked Reformation history, Alec. And
Yeah.
so I got accepted into Marquette, Ohio State, and Harvard. Those are the three schools we were looking at. And but my wife got sick that summer.
Hmm.
Carol did. She had some unexplained bleeding going on, and so we weren't quite sure what was happening there. And so we decided not to go forward with doctoral work. We probably would have went to Ohio State. You had Kettleson. He's a pretty famous Luther kind of
Sure.
scout.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Um, and so I would have studied with Kettleson is kind of the plan probably. Um, and so we just took a year off and decided we're not going to go on. During that year, that's when I got to know Gene Benkowski. Okay. And Gene was a missionary inside Nigeria for 25 years. Robert Preuss had brought him to the Fort Wayne faculty to start this doctorate of missiology program.
Okay.
And that's kind of the shift. I mean, I've always been church planting, you know, I've got
Yeah.
that in me a bit, but we really didn't think about overseas missionary experience at all. But then I started spending time with Gene and with Bob Newton. You know, Bob was district president out there inside California, Nevada, Hawaii. Newton, really good guy, Bob. And so we started, I took a couple of classes then inside the doctorate of missiology stuff. And I really enjoyed culture, anthropology, trying to understand other people. I've already had that a bit. So we decided to just do those studies. And that led then to Bob Rogner. He was Africa area secretary at the time. Bob, okay? So
Bob was, when I was at seminary, he
yeah,
was, I did my field work at Chapel of the Cross,
okay,
St. Peter's.
sure,
And then for they had a daughter congregation called
okay.
Peace, and Bob was the pastor. And
Bob
so
was,
Bob,
yeah.
he was essentially functionally my fieldwork supervisor for over a year. And we
Oh,
actually, my Rachel, my wife,
yeah.
was the music director at that church.
Oh
And we
my.
had met previously, and then we kind of had met again through that. So it was so yeah, I've
Isn't
got
that
to spend a
amazing?
year
Yeah. Well,
under
we were
Bob
thinking,
Rogner.
we were at a big church though, Kendallville, really St. John's in Kendallville is a great congregation. Okay. It was a large church.
Yeah,
We had a parochial school. We worshiped about 500 when we left. So it's a decent sized church for the Midwest. Okay. Kendallville was.
sure.
And so I was the associate pastor with Paul Griebel, just a great pastor. Um, but then we started thinking about 2 years, like about 1992, I think, Alec, about
Okay.
overseas missionary experience. Bob Newton and I went down to Haiti for a week and did some teaching. And
Okay.
that was the beginning of it. So
Yeah.
I had a small short-term immersion event. That's what they would call it now, probably. And
Yeah.
I liked Haiti. I liked teaching. I liked being with Newton. And so I came back and I remember Carol, we were talking that night. I said, hon, you know, I think you probably could live overseas, you know, at least I think I could give it a try. I never thought about it. And then, but our kids were pretty young. Johnny, our youngest, was 3 years old at the time, I think. And so we had 4 kids, Leah, Joseph, and then Joshua and Jonathan. Leah would have been 11 when we went to Africa, and Johnny would have been 5. Okay. And
Okay.
so we wanted the kids to at least be that age. And then we wanted to have this experience. You know, we were thinking for our kids, Alec, if they could ever have a cross-cultural experience where they could live in another country for an extended period of time, that their lives would be better. They'd be more enriched too. So we did. We left a fairly big parish and did that for 6 years. Theological education by extension was the kind of the call. And so I would go out into the remote areas and then teach people the basics of the Christian faith to prepare them to be leaders inside the church. So the very thing that you're talking about there in Southeastern District, that's what we did inside Africa.
Yeah. I experienced, I did a summer, I think I told you before we started recording, I did a summer in Uganda, and that's what they would do. Same TEE, that's what they called it. TEE.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it was. That's what I did in Botswana. And then in South Africa, David Swahili was the bishop. And David asked me to move to South Africa. So we had one term inside Botswana, the second term in South Africa.
Okay.
And inside that place, then we gathered men once a month for a whole weekend, and we trained them to be pastors outside of the seminary.
Okay.
We did that 35. So Swahili and I did team teaching for about 2 years.
Okay.
And we trained 35 men, and we trained 3 women to be deaconesses inside the church during those weekends. And so that was really the other piece to this thing. So I'm used to doing that too. The men had full-time jobs. They were had their vocations, but the pastors, there's only about seven congregations to each pastor in South Africa. Is how it worked.
It's funny how you say that there's only 7 congregations to each pastor in South Africa.
Isn't that crazy? For us to think about that in the States, but that's how they worked it. So he did a circuit about every 2 months, the pastor could actually get to some of these more remote areas. So how do you care for those congregations then?
Yeah.
The pastor can't be there. So we train these men to kind of be their local pastor in a sense, even though the overseeing pastor was seminary trained. Yeah.
Well, it's funny when I was, like I said, the summer I spent in Uganda,
Yeah.
and this was with Jacob Gillard, who's now
Hmm.
at Calms, right? And
Okay.
then Shawan Trump, who's
Shino Shun.
still in East Africa. He
I
was a
know.
vicar at the time. They hosted me.
Oh
They were
my.
such gracious hosts,
Yeah.
and at the time in Uganda. Now they've set up a seminary. They've got they've got
Yeah.
many more ordained pastors. At the time, there was, I believe, about 80 congregations. They said,
Yeah.
and one ordained pastor.
Oh my.
so, so it's like, yes, you can see this function, and it did function, and it's like,
That's
yeah,
it.
and that seems to be
Yeah.
we're starting to experience that now,
You
right,
bet you
in
are.
our culture,
Yeah.
um,
And that's
because
one of the values. You got to see it. I got to see it. What are other ministry models that
yeah.
can work? Other cultures can do things, So yeah, anyway, it was
Well,
good. Yeah.
but I would go out visiting. That's what I just visited congregations,
Yeah.
and it was great. It was an incredible experience, and then the students who were they were functionally pastors there, and
Yeah.
they would host me, and they were wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I'd go to some of these places, and you get 200 people meeting together,
I know.
right, in a
And then,
single congregation, just kind of packed, and they're there to hear the word of God, and they're there to have fellowship with each other, and
yeah.
it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then what kind of what
Mhm.
talking about kind of tweaking or
Right.
refining your palate for uh, I don't know, culture or worldview,
Yeah.
what kinds of things then were you able to bring back to the States when you came back?
Yeah. I would say, one guy, his theory is that about 70% of the world's population is animistic. Okay.
Yeah,
So
sure.
in Africa, you get a chance to see animism. Okay. Um, and so, in a sense, that is kind of our way. Uh, Man's always pragmatic. And that's kind of Western too. I mean, Harvey Cox wrote a book, real popular one back in the 60s. He talked about how urban man, secular city, the secular city was the title of the book, I think. And he said the secular man is pragmatic and he's profane, is the two
Oh,
words that he
interesting.
used. Profane, he's terrestrial. He really doesn't think you need too much spiritual stuff to make life work. And then we're pragmatic, what really works, okay? And
But real,
so,
I don't mean, sorry to interrupt, but
oh,
when
that's
you
good.
say profane, you're talking in a not in a popular sense, but in a
Yeah,
kind of in a proper sense, with the distinction between secular and profane, or
that's right.
sorry,
That's
secular and
right. No,
profane,
you're good.
sacred and profane.
That's
Correct.
right.
It's a so this is a
That's
a
right.
construct or a paradigm
That's
in
right.
which an academic paradigm where you see there's a sacred versus the profane, and essentially it's sacred is something is in the right place, right?
That's
Uh,
right. That's
so all
right.
right, so I just want to be clear that profane, because I think nowadays when we think profane or in popular culture, it's something that's
That's right.
that's unkind, or it's
That's right.
impolite or something. But this is, you're talking more specifically, as you said, terrestrial, right?
That's right. And
Okay.
that's how he would have looked at it there. And so you really don't need the sacred much. It's that idea too that Bonhoeffer had, that uh, we don't need the religious hypothesis here inside Germany now,
Hmm.
at that time when he was there as a pastor. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the thinking behind it. Okay, I think too, Alec, yeah. And and again, man's kind of animistic. So even here inside the States, one carryover, I guess, was just seeing how we are animistic. We're looking for life force, and if life isn't working, where do I turn in order to have a blessing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyways, that kind of an idea, Africans are driven with that. And then so I think that's one thing that I saw. The communal side, we're pretty individualistic here in
Sure.
America. I got a chance to experience more of a communal way of life. How do you
Yeah.
look at time? here in America, we're really driven by time. Okay. In Africa, I just gave up wearing a watch because it didn't matter. Really, you
Yeah.
try to be on time. I'd always be on time, but nobody else ever was on time. And so I learned pretty quick that, don't get so worked up on this. When people show up, that's really when time kind of begins.
I loved that.
When life really begins is when we're
Yeah,
together.
that's right.
But here in America, shoot, time, we're driven by it. It's really so. And so there's some things I learned about,
Yeah.
the main categories, I guess, inside life. How do cultures look at it? Okay, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So seeing the world in uh,
yeah.
different
And the
categories,
importance of
different paradigms.
hospitality, probably, Alec. I think that stands out for me too.
Yeah.
In the ministry that you're talking about there in Southeastern District, opening up our homes. That was different for us, because we ran the guest house in Haberoni. And so missionaries would come in order to do a business in the government and stuff like that, do some shopping and stuff. So they'd stay in our guest house. So
Sure.
we'd have nationals, youth would come to our home every night. So we're right by the combi station. That's the main area where the vans are and stuff to get you back out to the remote areas where you live. We were within walking distance of there. So we just had people show up at our house every night,
Yeah.
and they're just being with us. As Americans, we weren't quite used to that yet. We had got our private space, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
we learned to really like having people be in our home every night. The hospitality side, pretty important. If you're not hospitable, that sends a big signal to people too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, you see that you see that in the Bible too, right? It's all
Yep.
over, right?
Yep.
Hospitality is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
don't, show hospitality to strangers,
Yep.
right? Some have entertained angels without even realizing it.
That's right.
you
That's
know,
exactly it. That's
you
right.
think of like Abraham and
That's right.
but it's interesting. I guess I never put this together, the piece about time and hospitality, because it's something I experienced too.
Yep.
And in it, I like the way that you talk about it is it's time. I guess it's time to start when the people are here. It's
That's
time
right.
to start when you're with the right people, as opposed to being a slave to the
That's right.
to the clock, right? I've got tons of
That's right.
clocks on my walls. It's all about scheduling and
Yeah.
but thinking about that with hospitality, that goes hand in hand with hospitality. I just never considered that before. It's the same value
Yeah.
that's guiding both of those
Yeah.
two different things.
Yeah. See, one story that really jumps
Huh.
out for me was my first gathering with the pastors there in Botswana. Um, we were at a regional pastors conference, so there was probably about 40 of us. Okay, a bunch of us were there, a lot of students and stuff. But anyway, Marahelo, he's the current bishop right now, Modisa. Okay, he's a good friend of mine, probably my best friend when I was there in Africa.
Hmm.
He's the current bishop. Um, his family lived in Potchefstroom, which is about maybe an hour away from Rustenburg, where we were staying. Okay, not Rustenburg, we were inside Winterthur. Sorry. So we were driving there, and I was already tired, because culture learning. You just got there. We had lived there less than a year, so it's probably 3 months. Okay, I'm kind of tired. Getting to know everybody, listening, trying to figure out the
Yeah.
Setswana a little bit, what they were saying. So anyway, I was drained, but it's like 11 o'clock, and Marahilo wanted to go back and see some of his family. He had to do something. I forget what it was. And so I said, well, I'll drive. So I drove. And the crazy part is, okay, in America, it'd have been a 5-minute visit. You just get in and out, you grab
Yeah.
what you're going to get, and then you get back. Okay. That's not how it works in Africa. The whole neighborhood starts coming up to the door. It took us 45 minutes to get into the house.
Yeah.
Then once you're in the house, you're just not grabbing your thing. You got to visit about another half hour shot inside the house, and then leaving, you had to say goodbye to everybody. So it took us another 45 minutes to get out of there.
Hmm.
So a 5-minute job took us 2 hours. Okay.
Yep.
And so, but I learned the culture that day, that these are the things you do. You greet everybody. You say hi to everybody. You take
Yeah.
the time. Okay. And it was really good learning for me. That's part of it too. What's the pattern in the culture? as you interact with each other. Okay, what are these dimensions? Like Kesselgrave wrote a really good book on 7 dimensions of cross-cultural communication. And
Okay.
one of them is, how do you interact with other people? Okay, what is their style? Okay, and you
Yeah.
have to be sensitive to that. If you really want to communicate one day in the future, you need to learn their way of interacting with each other. So that's just an important thing I learned that day. It was really good for me. Mar Hill, he was so good, but man, I was tired. Jeez, man, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then you go back and they still stay up all night till 3 in the morning
Yeah.
because they haven't seen each other since they were seminarians, you know? So they're
Yeah.
catching up on their family and on ministry. You talk all night long. So anyway, so it's just how things are, Alec. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's something that you wouldn't, well, I can't imagine that would happen, at least around where I am right
Yep.
now, the
That's right.
same way. I mean,
That's right.
it could, we do have extended visits with people, but it's like, that's just the way you live life.
That's right.
It's
That's
a,
our pattern here. So
yeah.
what's the patterns? How can we be sensitive to the patterns of the culture, the subcultures that we have to walk into? They would call that cultural framing. You know, what's
Hmm.
the cultural frame here? What's the appropriate way, one in time? How do you do things here? So it means a lot of learning though, Alec. It means a lot of adapting, you know, to situations. So it's not easy. It's not easy for people. Yeah.
Well, I wonder what kinds of things do we just kind of overlook or don't realize that are just kind of there
Hmm.
in our interaction that reveals something about our own culture that we don't see, a big blind spot.
That's
I'm
right.
sure that I'm sure we communicate just as, talking about time and hospitality and the way you visit communicates, this care for uh, other people and
That's,
this desire to be with people.
yeah.
What do our practices communicate about us?
That's right.
I think we might be.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably plenty of good and bad alike, right?
Yep.
But we might not realize the negative things that we communicate.
The
Uh,
best here's just a really good example because it kind of deals with some of the protesting going on in our country right now.
hmm,
It happened to us when we first landed in Botswana. I shared this here in the district inside a little bit of a newsletter. Um, we just we had just landed in Gaborone, the capital there, and we're coming off our plane. Okay, British Air. This was a big plane, and it's like 108 already outside. I mean, it's really hot there in
yeah.
Botswana. Okay, and we deplane, and we're getting our stuff, and all the guys helping us are black. Okay,
Okay.
and Johnny grabbed Carol's skirt and just said, "Mom, when are we going to be that black?" Okay, because he just assumed, that we're going to be
Yeah.
in the hot sun. Eventually our skin's just going to darken up.
How old was he?
5.
Okay. Yeah.
No,
Sure.
Johnny's 5, and then one of the workers though said, "Do you want to be black?"
Oh,
He
interesting.
said back, wasn't that powerful? And then
Yeah.
we had a chance to talk about that as a family. We didn't real. This is your blind spot question there.
Yeah.
There's certain advantages of just being white, even though we just arrived. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
just landed. We're American. We got white skin. We probably got a little bit of money, even though we're just
Yep.
middle class. I mean, compared to
Yep.
Americans, we're middle class. But there's certain advantages that we had landing in Botswana and in South Africa just because we were white.
Yeah.
We didn't earn it, but just the color of our skin.
Yep.
And that's a blind spot, I think, in a way that we have inside life. We get advantages that are attributed to us, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, that's just, anyway. So
Yeah. We
that
don't
was,
even
by the
realize it.
way, I think, a blind spot there, Alec,
Yeah.
for us as a family. So we talked about it that night. What is it
Yeah.
like to be white in this country here?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating
Mhm.
because obviously that is, that's a big part of our conversation right now
It bet it is.
in our culture, and
Right.
it is. I think we probably don't even do enough of thinking about what things do we take for granted. I mean, everybody, right?
Yeah,
Because we talk about race. Also, I often think of like a nationality.
that's right.
That's another thing.
You bet.
I'll never forget the question that was posed one time. It was posed to me indirectly, but the question was, "What is it like to live in a superpower?"
Yeah.
before, and it wasn't posed directly to me.
That's
Uh,
right. That's right.
but that question, that question never crossed my mind.
I know.
Never crossed my mind, and I thought
Yeah.
about that, and I've been thinking about that question for,
Yeah.
gosh, almost a decade now.
Yep. That's a great question because you're right.
Never
We
even
grew up
considered
in
that.
America and we have power. I mean, there's certain principalities and power. We
Yeah,
are a superpower just because of all the resources we're able to marshal
yeah,
on a given event or issue. That's right. Yeah.
yeah.
That's how the
But
world perceives us. We're one of two or three superpowers.
yeah,
So what does that mean? Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's something that I think is, we just kind of we just another thing that just we're just kind of blind to. We don't even think about. We just kind of take it for granted. And there's all kinds of stuff like that.
That's right.
And I think the more that we do that, then we get to know maybe our cultural or our, blind spots as, as different groups, and as well as
Right.
individuals. We see that more and more. And
Yeah.
but of course, I think a big part of that is being, having open and honest conversations about things, and just kind of talking, right? Kind of as like we're doing right now, just kind of talking
Right.
about stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so so I don't- I do want to ask you about
Yeah.
something. This is a part of this, right? I've been a pastor for 3 years. You've
Yeah.
been a district president
Yeah.
for, what is it, since for about
It's
8
been
years
about
now?
8 years.
So in
Yeah.
your second term.
Well, third term,
Oh,
just
third term. Gosh, I
third
can't do
term.
math.
Yeah.
Third
That's
term.
right.
Do you have term limits for the New Jersey
Not
district?
here inside New Jersey, but
Okay.
like, yeah, today I just turned 65. Okay, Alex.
Okay.
So I made
Oh,
that.
happy birthday. I didn't know
Oh,
that.
I know, I know. But yeah, so that's kind of a key marker. And so I said I could serve until I was 66 if they wanted me
Okay.
to. I'm stepping down. I could
Okay.
keep on going, but it's good to have other people use their gifts. There's other
Yeah.
brothers that can do this very well.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I'm thankful. But yeah, district president for 8 now. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So so we'll, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah.
We'll plug the deacon program here in a second, but I guess one of the last things I want to ask is,
Yeah.
uh, what's it like being a district president?
And overall, it's really about, I'd say 70 to 80% is pretty enjoyable overall.
All right.
You end up dealing with
No.
some of the stuff that's not so pleasant in the church,
Sure.
like, a couple of the brothers, if they struggle a little bit, you end up having to work with them and maybe even discipline. That's probably the hardest part. Like a good example is when I was elected district president, one of my good friends said, "Well, will we still be friends?" Okay. So that was his question. So it kind of shows how the brothers look at you. Okay,
Well,
once you become a DP,
well,
you
it's an
still have
interesting
friends
thing.
for life.
I assume that most people don't go to seminary to become a district president,
No, you
right?
don't.
Right.
No.
So it's
No.
hopefully.
Yeah, that's it.
so it's got to be the kind of this very it's a very exceptional, I think, experience
Yeah,
from the outside. Right
yeah,
now after 8 years, I'm sure it's more of a
yeah,
mundane thing for you, but from the outside, it seems, an exceptional spot.
yeah.
So what was the transition like then,
What,
moving into the position?
yeah, what you end up doing then, I think, you always said in our church body, Alec, you got two members of synod primarily. You got commissioned teachers too, of course, which are really important, commissioned ministers. But you're really working with the members of synod. So whenever, like yesterday, I was with a congregation. You've got the pastor there doing an official visit kind of thing, and
Okay.
then you do the congregation itself's a member of synod. So you're always trying to care for both members of synod when they
Yeah.
gather like that. You try to be as fair as you look at their ministry as a congregation and as the church worker. And then you want both to be able to do really well,
Yeah.
together in their life together, I think. So those are always the things that you're working. So ecclesiastical supervision, what's the condition of the lampstand? That's a great question, I think, in the book of Revelation. You got
Oh, interesting.
Revelation
Yeah.
3, you got the seven churches, and Jesus is walking in the midst of the lampstands trying to lift up, this is good what you're doing, but this maybe isn't so good what you're doing. You used to be doing this. You forgot now that that's pretty important. You probably should be doing that. So that's how I look at the district presidency. You're trying to gauge the condition of the lampstand and then the ministry of the church worker too. And then how can you just encourage, I think, correct a little bit,
Yeah.
but I like to encourage more than, like to affirm more than I like to
Yeah.
correct, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So
Very
that's
good.
kind of my style, I guess. So you do that kind of thing, I think. And you try to have good relationships with the brothers. I think the church workers, you know, how are they holding up with all the stuff that's going on? A lot of the guys have had to do a lot of adaptive stuff because of
Sure.
COVID, right? And that's kind of draining. It's like walking into a new culture, you know, Alec, right?
It is.
So guys are pretty tired, you know, right now. They need a break this summer. And so anyway, those are different things. But it's nice. I mean, it really is overall. I mean, but I'd say 15 to 20% of it, somebody's got to do it, you know, so it's okay, I think, that you
Yeah.
become the one to do it, but it's not so pleasant, some of that stuff.
Yeah. From the outside, it looks like a very tough position.
Uh,
It looks like it can be a very,
but you learn yourself, you know, like in ministry, right? You do that the first 3 to 5 years, 7 years in ministry. You learn a lot about yourself and your style. Same
yeah.
with being a DP. I would say the first year or 2 years, you don't sleep as well, you know, because you're
Sure.
always thinking about all the stuff going on and how can I help correct this and how can I do some problem solving. But after about 7 years, really, it's quicker than that. You learn your styles. You learn what you're pretty good at and what you're not so good at. Then you allow others to help you, vice presidents,
Sure.
circuit visitors, they can help you. See,
Sure.
so it gets easier, you know, over
And
time.
as your experience as mission exec,
That
we
helped
didn't
a
talk
lot.
about that a whole lot, but leading up to that, I'm sure,
That's
yeah,
right. That
yeah,
helped a lot too with relationships and stuff like that. But a lot of it's just relational. The
yeah,
brothers do know you love them, you care for them.
yeah,
Even if you have to do discipline, that really they understand that part of it.
yeah.
They're mature enough, you know,
Well,
that
and
they know that they failed on something, they need to work at something.
yeah, and
So
it's pastoral. You're
mhm,
you're a pastor's pastor in a lot of ways.
yeah,
So
it's worked out that way. I've liked that part. That's why Jersey's so nice because it's a small district. You know,
mm,
I really get to know everybody, and that I've really, yeah, it's been nice. I can get home every night. You know,
yeah,
I'm
so
really fortunate. Some of the districts are so large that you don't get home, but I can get home every night. Yeah,
yeah, our district, southeastern district, of course, is from South Carolina to the southernmost county in
that's right.
Pennsylvania. So
That's right.
it's
I know.
massive.
Up in York County, up there in
Yep,
Pennsylvania. Yeah,
yep. So, all right. So you'll be teaching Old Testament. Really, it's missiology in the Old Testament
that's right.
specifically, which is
Yep.
awesome because we've got in the lay deacon program, we've got missiology is kind of a thread that runs all the way through,
Yep.
and you've taught at the beginning when I for my brief introduction, talked about you taught for 6 years at so you've taught online, and of course, our courses, late teaching program courses, are going to be online. So
Yep.
you've got it sounds like ample experience doing that, which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're kind of ahead of the game too in a lot of ways because now, of course, tons of classes are being forced online,
That's right.
unplanned.
That's
Now,
right.
kind of having to pick up the pieces with that, um, and 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 so I'm just curious. Your book,
Yeah.
Worldviews: A Christian Response to Religious Pluralism. How much of a role might that play in the way that you teach your courses? Because you taught a course on that specifically, and
Right.
obviously, as throughout the conversation as we've been talking, it's clearly a big part of you in your life, and we've been talking about worldview quite a bit.
Yeah.
But in what ways will the things that you talked about in your book kind of inform your teaching, if at all, I
Yeah.
suppose?
No, it will. You know, that's really a good question. Like we'll be meeting for 4 sessions, if I understand it right. You know,
Mm.
4 2-hour sessions.
Right.
Um, it really will fit pretty strongly in the applicational sessions, which is session 3 and 4, if I had to talk about it that way.
Okay.
The first one is the God of mission. We're going to kind of use the outline that Chris, I can't think of his name right now.
Right.
Yeah, Chris Wright,
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
book.
Which is
Okay.
an incredible
So we'll
book.
use his kind of one. So he talks about the God of mission, then he talks about the people of mission, then he talks about the arena of mission.
Hmm.
Okay. So when it comes to the arena of mission, we'll probably look at some of the cultures back then inside the Old Testament, where the
Yeah.
Canaanites, we'll look at the Philistines, we'll
Yeah.
look at the Moabites, Ammonites. So what I'll do is have the students we'll do this together, of course, but we'll look at their culture and their religious belief systems, the Baals, okay, that kind of
Sure.
thing. Okay, what was the belief system? And so that's the arena for mission as they interfaced with the religions around them. Okay, how did Israel be a priesthood of all believers kind of thing, a kingdom of priests kind of idea?
Yeah.
That's the second piece. Then the last piece then is what's the blueprint then? We'll look at a couple parables of Jesus, I think, that talk about Israel that maybe fit a little bit. You know, he sent prophets to them to help them reform, but they didn't listen to the prophets. They finally sent the Son. So we'll
Yeah.
look at a couple of parables. But anyway, what we're going to look at is an idea of Luther, the quorum relationships. I mean, we're always living out our life in the presence of God, the presence of other people. Okay. And so how do we live out this blueprint that God has for life? Okay. So that'll be the fourth one, the real practical piece. As we interface with the nations around us, we'll learn in session 3 the belief systems of some of the pagan nations then. Okay. And so, but then the fourth one, what are the gods among us, okay, here
Mm.
inside our culture, and how do we live in the presence of the true God, but how do we do our mission, okay? So that's the fourth piece. So worldview really is pretty important because worldview looks at what's reality, what's ultimate allegiance, it looks at ethics, it looks at truth,
Okay.
okay? And so again, we'll wrestle with that piece, probably the fourth session, I think, especially, Alec, okay? Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll be
Awesome.
pretty practical, I think. You know, we'll
Yeah.
get at the foundational session 1 and 2. The applicational is going to be probably 3 and 4. And then what we'll do is they'll look at their local setting and try to figure out a blueprint for ministry so that they are that kingdom of priests. You know, I really want to focus on that, the priesthood of all believers.
Yeah.
That's side of it, Alec. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is an incredibly important thread throughout the Old Testament, you know,
Yeah. That's right. The kingdom of
and in the
priests.
into the New
Exodus
Testament,
19.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a very jam-packed 8 hours.
Good.
I said, I said,
That's
I think
what
it's
yeah, I kind of feel overwhelmed. I'm trying to put some of the stuff together right now. And there's so much there, right? How do you do the Old Testament in
yeah,
8 hours kind of
yeah,
thing? So you really are trying to figure out what's the best stuff. Okay.
yeah.
What's helpful. And that's what I'll do my best at it. Yeah.
Well, as I said before about the program, just in general, I think this is
Yeah.
this sounds like it's going to be a very loaded class, which
Yeah.
people will get a lot out of it, which is really neat.
It's excellent what you guys have been doing. I mean, you've architected out a really strong formation process. Okay, what you've done as a committee there, you know, Alec,
Yeah,
you guys have done a really nice job. I think when I saw that, I was really impressed with what you've done. Yeah.
yeah, I think I actually am a kind of a newcomer to the committee, and
Okay.
they had laid the idea of having the coaching and the classes,
Yeah.
and then having very specific courses, right? So
Mhm.
with like I said, with the thread, it's all very it's it's there for a reason,
Yeah.
and I was very impressed with it when I saw it myself for the first time. It's
I agree.
very calculated, which is very good.
Yeah. This
Um,
is going to be a nice offering for Synod, for the district, for the East
yeah,
region, but even for Synod, what this model of formation and equipping and training is really good. You
yeah.
really are helping all of us inside our church body by
Yeah.
doing this. Yeah.
Well, and thank you for being coming from the New Jersey district to teach.
Yeah.
I should
Yeah.
say staying in the New Jersey district and still teaching through.
Well,
um,
it's good. It's a fun thing, but you know, there's a lot of other people too that have good gifts. You
yeah,
know, so they can contribute to this thing. But it's nice being asked and that
yeah,
over to try and sharing the things that you've come across over the years. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sitting down and talking with me, and
Well,
maybe
this is
one
great.
day we can sit down in person and talk more. I feel like there's so much to talk about. But we'll cut it off here, and thank you again. So if anyone is interested in the uh, Southeastern District Lay Ministry Program, you can go to the website, the Southeastern District website. We'll put it in the comments, or not the comments, the
Mm.
description of the YouTube description. You can go there and you can find more information about that. So Yeah. Have a great day.